Welcome to Pulse on Politics, rooted in place but expansive in scope. This podcast keeps a finger on the pulse of political currents shaping our region and the nation at large. We share bold voices, real stories, and a zero spin. I am your host, Tamara Graham. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome back to our bonus series on Trump's big ugly bill, the fascist piece of legislation that screws the American people in ways most don't even comprehend yet. We are going through it section by section, line by line to break down what it actually does and how it affects we the people. This is episode 3. We're talking about student loans and education today, also known as Title IV. This one really pisses me off. This whole damn fascist bill is trash, but this section, it slams the door on higher education for anyone who doesn't come from money. And it's forcing working class and low-income families into decades of predatory debt just to get an education, if they can get one at all, and many won't be able to. It actually makes things much worse instead of fixing anything wrong with this system. It's clear what they want. Either you come from a wealthy family and get access to opportunity by birth, or you don't. And if you don't, you are either drowning in interest and chained to debt or locked out completely. They are turning education in this country into a privilege instead of a right, and it is an absolute right in 2025. And if we don't shut this shit show down, my friends, this country is going to become an absolute hellscape for anyone who doesn't already have power. Upward mobility is going to die a painful death and rapidly. As I was putting this episode together, my blood was boiling, and once you hear the numbers, you are going to understand why. But before we get into it, I need to remind everyone, especially those of you still clinging to the propaganda and populist bullshit spewing from Trump and his regime on the daily. Let's get one thing straight. College in the United States of America used to be affordable. In fact, it was basically free or damn near close to it for most people. And that wasn't an accident. That was the point. We used to believe that an educated nation made us stronger, that giving regular people access to knowledge and opportunity was actually good for society. I know, gasp, right? The practice of free and affordable education has been under attack in this country for literal decades. And you can trace the wreckage straight back to the Grand Poobah himself, Ronald Reagan. When Ronald Reagan was governor of California, one of his first political missions was to go after the University of California system, which at the time was tuition free, my friends. Why? Because college students were organizing. They were protesting the Vietnam War, they were demanding for their civil rights, and they were refusing to bow to the system. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Well, Reagan did what fascists do. Punish dissent. His answer was to make them pay for it. He literally said, quote, "Why should taxpayers be subsidizing intellectual curiosity?" End quote. I think a better question would have been, why should taxpayers subsidize corporate greed? Smart and prosperous nations invest in its people, all of its people, but that's not what capitalists do. Capitalists who want to live off the tit of the American people. In 1967, his first year as governor of California, Reagan cut $22 million from the state's higher education budget. That's the equivalent of about $207 million today. He also introduced mandatory student fees, which ballooned into full-on tuition by the 1980s. And once he became president in 1980, taking office in 81, he took that same playbook national. He gutted federal aid, slashed funding for public universities, shifted the burden onto the backs of students and families. Instead of grants, we got loans. And it didn't stop with Reagan. Every administration since, including the so-called centrist Democrats, has doubled down on this model. Neoliberals push the idea that education should be run like a business and that it should operate like a market. As a result, students became customers, colleges became profit centers, And Wall Street, they do what they always do. They cashed in. And they did it on the backs of 18-year-olds signing predatory loan documents they barely understood. In 1988, I was one of them, my friends. I come from a working class family. I was the first child and grandchild on both sides to go to college. My sister and my brother followed me. My sister holds a PhD. My brother has 2 master's degrees. I have a master's degree. And we all carry heavy student loan debt. Every one of us. And by the 2000s, many universities started implementing performance-based funding models where state funding was tied to enrollment numbers, graduation rates, and post-grad income, mirroring corporate KPIs. The cuts to public funding for higher education forced schools to replace lost revenue with things like increased tuition, corporate partnerships, philanthropic dependency, often with strings attached. Shift from grants to loans. In 1980, federal Pell Grants covered more than 75% of the cost of a 4-year public college. By 2020, they covered less than 30%. And with this big ugly bill, in 2026, it's going to be even less. And this is the same policy that created fertile ground for for-profit predatory colleges, my friends, because of course it did. That's all capitalism is. Predatory. You've heard of the University of Phoenix, right? Corinthian colleges, Trump University. These institutions marketed aggressively to low-income and working-class students, just like our military does. They raked in billions in federal student aid, often for substandard education without delivering any real outcomes. And when these schools collapsed or students defaulted, the public absorbed the cost while executives walked away rich. Because that's how American-style capitalism works, right? Socialism for the executives and shareholders and nothing but debt and consequences for the rest of us. And the lenders? They cashed in too. Ever heard of Sallie Mae? They've made over $30 billion in profit in just the last decade. And much of it is off the income-driven repayment plans. And under this new bill, they'll get even richer. Because now, students don't have anywhere else to go. And that's how we got here. Education went from a door to opportunity to a lifelong financial cage. And now, under this big ugly bill, they are welding that fucking cage shut. Okay, we are going to break this down starting with student loan forgiveness programs because, my friends, they have been wiped out completely. Before the big ugly bill, nearly 8 million borrowers were enrolled in the Saving on Valuable Education Plan, also known as SAVE. Payments were capped around $62 a month on a $50,000 income, for example. Forgiveness came after 10 or 20 years, and public service loan forgiveness, PSLF, full cancellation after 120 qualifying payments. That's 10 years. That's gone now. The big ugly bill kills all of it. Retroactively. Save, gone. PSLF, gone. Repay, pay, IBR, all wiped out. No forgiveness, not now, not later, even for people already partway through. Nearly 8 million borrowers were actively shrinking their balances under these programs. Now, that future, the one they were counting on, is gone. It's just gone. They're not just ending relief going forward. They are literally reaching into your life and ripping up promises you already built your future around. Imagine this. You're 8 years into PSLF. Your balance is finally dropping. Then they light the whole program on fire and say, oops, you have to start over. If not, you have to pay forever. If you choose careers like nursing, teaching, public service, any career that serves people but doesn't pay well, you're now stuck with the full balance plus interest. That's tens of thousands of dollars more than you expected to owe. And it follows you to the grave. And do not come at me with a bullshit excuse of just get a better job. There aren't better jobs. Not in a system that's gutted wages, outsourced everything, and trapped people in gig work with no benefits. They have rigged the game, and now they're blaming you for trying to survive inside of it. Next, we're going to talk about income-driven repayment, because that's also been rigged and rebranded. They've replaced SAVE with RAP, Payment Assistant Plan. Payments are going to be between 1% and 10% of your income, a minimum of $10 a month. Forgiveness comes only after 30 years of payments, not 10 or 20, 30. You will be paying student loans longer than your marriage is going to last, most likely, or even your job, maybe even your health. No unpaid interest waivers, no economic forbearance, only high-cost forbearance, which means interest will continue to accumulate. Calculations show that a typical borrower with $38,000 in debt goes from paying $62 a month to $200 to $300 a month. That is $1,600 to $3,000 more every year, on top of having to scramble just to survive. You are now locked into decades of debt repayments. Interest crushes your balance while you try to earn enough to survive. You're working harder with no real relief in sight. Even job loss won't delay interest. Only forbearance is allowed, and it piles on. Oh, and by the way, you can't file bankruptcy on student debt. You can thank the Grand Poobah Reagan and the neoliberals for that also. But they can file bankruptcy as many times as they would like with zero penalty. And they get to walk away with taxpayers' subsidized billions. You get nothing except struggle, grief, and anxiety. Now let's talk about the borrowing caps because, yep, there sure are some. They pitch this as responsibility, as if these motherfuckers have taken responsibility for literally anything in their lives. What this really is exclusion. Undergrad loans were left unchanged. They are still capped at $31,000 for dependent students and $57,500 for independent students. However, that used to be a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized loans. There's a change there also, which we'll get to in a moment. Graduate loans, they are capped at $20,500 per year with a $100,000 lifetime max. If you know anything about the cost of graduate school, you know this is a joke. Professional degrees, law school, med school, dental, astronomical in cost, capped $50,000 a year, $200,000 total. There is going to be a literal brain drain in this country, my friends. Parent Plus loans, capped at $65,000 total, regardless of the cost of education. Lifetime federal borrowing across all loan types, capped at $257,000. Now, on top of that, H.R. 1, this bill, eliminates all federal subsidized loans for undergraduates and Graduate Plus loans, converting them into subsidized loans across the board. That means interest starts accruing from day one signed on the dotted line, your first semester of your freshman year. Before you've even taken your first final or earned a dime, interest starts accruing. Every dollar borrowed starts collecting interest immediately. No grace period, no break. Undergraduate students from low-income backgrounds can no longer access interest-free aid. The full cost of attendance now includes front-loaded interest, pushing more students deeper into debt faster. Planning for med school, law school, or how about that PhD you've been thinking about? Yeah, you're going to hit the ceiling before you can even graduate. Want to borrow more? Need to borrow more? Well, you're in luck. You get to go private and pay triple the interest. We're talking at minimum 12 to 13% interest for student loans. And on top of that, there's no forbearance options, no income-driven repayment, and no safety net, my friends. With this change, this bill doesn't just wipe out forgiveness plans. It dismantles one of the last buffers that helped limit debt for working-class students in this country. This is not reform. It's a deliberate removal of protections designed to keep students from drowning in interest before they even start out in life. But wait, it gets even better. Pell Grants, the bedrock of access, slashed. The maximum award is being cut by 23%. It is going from $7,395 a year to $5,710 per year. The credit load requirement has also jumped from 24 credit hours to 30 credit hours. And so it used to be 12 credit hours a semester was considered full-time, and that's a lot, especially for more complicated degrees. It is now 15 credit hours. 15 credit hours. That is obscene. Obscene. And part-time students, yeah, they lose eligibility altogether. This is absolutely devastating for low-income students and literally cements generational poverty. This is beyond fucking acceptable, is what this is. So, working adults, single parents, part-time students, they are going to lose eligibility entirely. Hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid that once supported higher education access is going to vanish. State-level scholarships, like here in Michigan, we have the Michigan Tuition Incentive Program. It will compound this loss. Students relying on a Pell Foundation to meet eligibility are going to fall through the cracks. This bill nationally is going to take away $7 billion from students over the next decade and line the pockets of useless billionaires. This should enrage you. This is cementing generational poverty. This is guaranteeing slave labor for generations, if we allow it. But wait, it gets even better. This one's for all of you tradespeople, because learning a trade isn't free either, and you are getting screwed as well. They snuck in something called Workforce Pell Grants, and this is to help fund short-term trade and technical training, which I am 100% for, in theory. Anyone would be. Anyone who actually gives a shit about this country and its people, you are going to support education for anyone and everyone. But you are in for a rude awakening, because the CBO estimates the Workforce Pell Grant will add $298 million per year based on about 100,000 additional students annually getting access to grants for short-term programs. Excellent, right? Anyone who supports education supports this. But there's always a but when it comes to Republican senators. An Urban Institute analysis shows that 79% of vocational certificate programs won't even qualify because student earnings after graduation do not exceed the cost of tuition. Only 8% of private for-profit programs are likely to pass the earning threshold. Community colleges, it's about 81% of them, but then you have to meet the criteria of a traditional Pell Grant at a community college and not these Workforce Pell Grants. This really still leaves most vocational training programs ineligible. So do you know what's going to happen? These students who don't qualify for Workforce Pell Grants, they'll be pushed straight into private loans, predatory loans, just like traditional college students are. And they will rack up debt with sky-high interest rates, only now it's for short-term programs that were supposed to be the affordable alternative. They'll be stuck paying the debt for decades with no real path to upward mobility. Just another generation chained to the same system. Mighty white of them, they're Republicans, hey? They, as in Republicans, promise access to short-term education paths. Then they crimp them with earnings rules and placement requirements. That $298 million estimate gets thrown in just so the bill looks like it's expanding help to its base. But most programs don't qualify. And even that $298 million is a projected floor. The real cost could be far higher, and it will be. It always is. And it'll be dependent on actual enrollment, which again, I am all for fully funding education in this country in all forms. But the problem is that they framed this as a handout to workforce training, and the truth is, it's just more smoke and mirrors. This is the trade school gray zone. We're supposed to believe this helps people who don't want college. But what it does is it locks them out unless they jump through corporate-style hoops where only programs tied to earnings are going to survive and thrive. This is why our government should not be run like a fucking corporation. They love to scream, college isn't for everyone, then sabotage the alternative for that as well. This is not reform. This is another trap. So let's summarize what all of this means for we regular folk. If you're poor or working class, if you're a first-generation student, a single parent, or a working adult, college just got a whole hell of a lot farther away and a whole hell of a lot more expensive. And the debt trap, it is now legal entrapment. They're saying education isn't a right when it abso-fucking-lutely is. They're saying it's a privilege and you have to pay for that privilege with your freedom. You have to become their slave if you want to advance, which really isn't advancing, is it? And if you don't choose to advance, you're still their slave because then you're stuck in a low-wage hellscape. We're going to look at the same scenario here under the current system and then what the big ugly bill brings to us. Picture a 38-year-old single mom in Michigan. Under the current system, as flawed as it is, she goes back to school part-time to finish her degree. She qualifies for a Pell Grant, which helps cover tuition. She takes out a subsidized student loan to handle the rest, books, childcare, and gas. After graduation, the SAVE plan keeps her afloat with manageable payments tied to her income. She makes progress, she holds on, she builds a better life, and gives her children more opportunity for success. But under this new plan, same scenario, that same mother is locked out before she even gets started. She no longer qualifies for Pell because she's part-time. There are no more subsidized loans, so interest starts racking up the second she signs on the dotted line. And with no SAVE plan, her monthly payments would be unaffordable from day one. So she can't do it. She's stuck. No degree, no chance to earn more, no way out. She spends the rest of her life struggling. This isn't reform. This is deliberate. And if we let this shit stand, we are complicit in a system that punishes people for trying to pull themselves out from poverty. They didn't close the door on opportunity. They sold it off, privatized it, and locked it behind a goddamn paywall. And the people who need the help the most, they're the ones getting punished. In the bigger picture, we all are, because the result is that we have a less educated and prosperous middle class. We have lower wages. We become their prey. We become their slaves. This is what they want. This is by design. They do not care. Are we going to allow this? Because we don't have to allow this. You understand that, right? This is episode 3, Student Loans and Education. Next episode, we talk about the tax code overhaul. You know, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. Yeah, it's not what you think it is. But let me end with this. They want you tired. And fuck, are we ever tired? They want you confused. They want you broke. They want you as slaves. Well, you know what I say to them? Go to hell with your chains. We're not wearing them. Thanks for listening to Pulse on Politics. If this episode moved you, challenged you, or lit a fire under you, share it, rate it, and keep the conversation going. Visit us at GreatLakesPulse.com to read our latest magazine, where we celebrate the Great Lakes Basin region with amazing adventures, stunning photography, high-profile content, and more. Follow us on social media at Great Lakes Pulse to stay connected. And don't forget to visit our Love Where You Live Foundation and support the initiatives that matter most. Protecting mental health, uplifting Indigenous voices, and preserving the waters and spirit of the Great Lakes. Visit lovewhereyoulivefoundation.org for more information and to donate. Until next time, my friends, stay grounded, stay alert, and keep your finger on the pulse.